Opening Fable: The Triangle That Became a Universe. Imagine a figure traced in dust, 3 lines forming a triangle, flat upon the ground. At first, it seems no more than a child's sketch, a shape without depth or consequence. The mind registers it as one object among countless others, as unremarkable as the shadow of a window pane. But suppose you are told that this triangle is not arbitrary. Suppose you are asked to square its sides, and then to compare the areas thus produced. As you do, something astonishing happens. The figure ceases to be a doodle and becomes a law. The right angle is no longer a convenience of construction, but a necessity of the universe, for the relationship of 3, 4, and 5 is true everywhere, in stone and star, in temple and cosmos. What was flat acquires dimension. What was black and white turns into colour. This is the miracle of the 47th proposition. With it, the Mason's chalk line becomes a key to truth, and the student of geometry becomes the philosopher of being. To prove the theorem is to experience the metamorphosis of symbol into principle, from image to law, from the visible to the intelligible. It is as if, in contemplating this simple configuration, one steps through a veil, discovering that behind every line and every measure lies the hidden architecture of order itself. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation from the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore. The Cry of Discovery. From Pythagoras to Euclid. Consider then the story with which Masonic tradition delights to begin. In the 6th century before Christ, the sage Pythagoras is said to have proved the relation of the right-angled triangle, and in the joy of his discovery to have exclaimed, "Eureka! I have found it!" Some tell us he sacrificed a hecatomb of oxen in thanksgiving, though this, too, becomes part of the parable, for the Pythagoreans abhorred slaughter. Yet the tale is not diminished by its impossibility. Its meaning is that the discovery of truth has the power to move the human soul to rapture, to overwhelm the boundaries of custom and of reason itself. This proposition, the 47th of Euclid's Elements, declares that in every right-angled triangle, the square on the hypotenuse equals the sum of the squares on the other 2 sides. Such a statement appears almost too obvious to us, who learn it in childhood, yet it remains one of the most profound demonstrations ever given. A truth which is not local, not temporal, but absolute. Whether traced in dust by an Egyptian builder or proved in symbols by a modern mathematician, the result is the same. This, therefore, is no mere device of measurement, but a revelation of universal law. Masonic writers have never failed to seize upon the grandeur of this claim. To them, Pythagoras is not only a philosopher of antiquity, but our ancient friend and brother. The cry of Eureka is thus reimagined as the primal acclamation of the initiate who beholds the hidden harmony of the world. When Euclid, centuries later, set the theorem into formal proof, he was not creating a novelty, but recording an eternal order, codifying the structure by which builders raise their temples and seekers raise their thoughts. And so, in our tradition, the 47th problem is not a curiosity of arithmetic, but the emblem of that moment when knowledge proves itself worthy of reverence. It is geometry as a sacrament, a visible sign of an invisible law, enduring as long as reason itself endures. The Foundation of the Craft, Anderson, Webb, and the Geometry of Masonry. If Pythagoras' Eureka embodies the cry of discovery, Euclid's Elements gave that cry its enduring form. Written around 300 BC, this monumental text is not merely a treatise but, as one commentator called it, the grammar of all scientific thought. It is here, in the first book, that the 47th proposition appears, no longer as legend, but as proof, set out with the calm inevitability of demonstration. This is why the medieval mind, in its old charges, made Euclid the patriarch of Masonry. The Regius poem of circa 1390 begins with the striking words, "Here begin the constitutions of the art of geometry, according to Euclid." No elaborate genealogy is given, no heroic founder invoked. Geometry itself, and geometry personified in Euclid, is declared the root of the craft. To practice Masonry was to practice geometry. The two were inseparable. When speculative Masonry arose in the 18th century, it inherited this conviction. James Anderson's Constitutions of 1723, one of the founding documents of the modern fraternity, crystallized it in memorable terms. He speaks of the greater Pythagoras, the inventor of the 47th proposition of Euclid's first book, which, if duly observed, is the foundation of all Masonry, sacred, civil, and military. The language is grand because the claim is grand. The 47th problem is not the foundation merely of architecture. It is the foundation of the sacred order of religion, the civil order of society, and the strategic order of war. In Anderson's telling, all human stability rests upon this one truth, that in a right-angled triangle, the square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the other two. William Preston, later in the century, made the connection still more explicit in his expanded lectures. Geometry, he said, was the first and noblest of sciences, and the basis on which the superstructure of Masonry is erected. Thomas Smith Webb, transmitting Preston's system to America, placed the 47th proposition at the climax of the Master Mason degree. There the candidate hears that Pythagoras, in discovering the theorem, was so transported with the joy of his discovery that he exclaimed Eureka and sacrificed a hecatomb. From this the lesson is drawn, that the Mason should be a general lover of the arts and sciences. Notice how the emphasis has shifted. In Anderson, the proposition grounds the institutions of society. In Preston and Webb, it educates the individual Mason. Yet in both, the message is the same. The 47th proposition is no mere curiosity of arithmetic. It is the emblem of truth proven by demonstration, a truth which supports both the temple of stone and the temple of virtue. Thus, we see the passage from legend to institution. What began as the ecstatic cry of a philosopher becomes enshrined as the ritual instruction of a fraternity. The 47th proposition, first traced in dust and codified by Euclid, is received into Masonry as the very law by which its mysteries are ordered. Interlude: Hogarth's Lampoon and the Shadow of Geometry. Step for a moment away from the solemn words of constitutions and lectures, and enter instead the bustling streets of 18th century London. It is the 1730s, and the satirist William Hogarth is at the height of his powers. His engravings flay the vices of his age with merciless precision, and the newly fashionable fraternity of Freemasons does not escape his wit. In his print night, 1738, from the series The Four Times of the Day, Hogarth shows a lodge of Masons reeling homeward after a feast. The worshipful master, garlanded in regalia, must be supported through the chaos of overturned coaches and quarrelling watchmen. Above this scene of disorder hangs the sign of the Swan Tavern, and beside the doorway a mason's square juts out to hold a flickering lamp. It is a brilliant inversion, the instrument of rectitude serving to illuminate moral confusion. Later, Masonic commentators, among them Bernard E. Jones, saw in this detail a sly allusion to Euclid's 47th proposition. Whether or not Hogarth intended so precise a reference, the association is apt. The square and the triangle, once emblems of perfect order, now hang ironically above a scene of debauchery. Geometry, the language of truth, is enlisted here as the signboard of folly. And yet, here lies the paradox. Even in satire, the power of the emblem endures. For Hogarth's jest depends upon recognition. His audience must already have known that the square, and by implication the 47th problem, belong to the Masons. Ridicule cannot wound unless the symbol has already struck root in the imagination. Thus, the scene turns upon its own irony. The token of order that once adorned the master's breast now lights the doorway of a tavern. But in that very descent it proves its ascendancy. A symbol mocked is still a symbol known, and when the artist must borrow the tools of masonry to deride its members, he confesses, however unwittingly, the permanence of its geometry. The Jewel of Mastery. Geometry as authority and legacy. If Hogarth mocked the triangle as the badge of drunken folly, the lodge itself enthroned it as the emblem of honour. Few symbols in masonry carry so distinguished a place as the jewel of a past master. And in many jurisdictions, particularly in England, Scotland, and the continental rights that followed their lead, that jewel is none other than the 47th proposition of Euclid. Picture the emblem. At its simplest, it is a set square, the traditional badge of a master, with the diagram of the right-angled triangle fixed upon it, often in silver or gold, sometimes richly enamelled, sometimes plain and austere. It is presented to a worshipful master upon the conclusion of his year of rule. To wear it is to be marked forever as one who has governed in the East, who has borne the responsibility of order and instruction. Out of the countless emblems that adorn our craft, the square, the compasses, the blazing star, it is striking that this single geometric diagram was chosen to accompany the honour of a past master. Why should that be? The set square itself reminds the master that he has ruled with rectitude, his measures true and his angles right. But the triangle, the 47th proposition itself, signifies more. That his rule rests not upon shifting preference, but upon immutable law. The departing master is invested not with a symbol of transient office, but with a token of eternal truth. His authority, if it has been rightly exercised, reflects the very balance of the cosmos. Albert Pike observed that geometry is the foundation of architecture and the root of mathematics. Others have gone further still. One 19th century commentator declared that the 47th proposition contains more real food for reflection than any other emblem in the master's lecture. It is no surprise, then, that it was chosen to adorn the jewel of a master who has completed his labours. His governance of the lodge is likened to that great geometrical proof, precise, proportionate, and incontrovertible. And yet there is an irony. As one Masonic writer confessed with some dismay, many past masters do not know why it is so centrally featured in their jewel. They wear upon their breast the symbol of cosmic harmony, often without perceiving the depth of its claim. But perhaps this, too, is fitting. For just as the uninitiated may pass the tavern sign without perceiving its secret, so too may the Mason bear the emblem without yet exhausting its mystery. The jewel therefore functions as both a reward and a reminder for labour done, and a reminder that the pursuit of truth is never complete. Consider also the operative parallel. In the days of stone, the 3-4-5 triangle was the simplest and most reliable way to square a corner, to ensure that foundations were exact. Without it, walls would lean, arches collapse, and the temple itself be imperilled. In speculative masonry, the same principle holds. The master must square the foundations of the lodge, not in stone, but in discipline, harmony, and truth. His labour, like the geometric proof itself, is to demonstrate order by reasoned rule. Thus, the past master's jewel is not a mere decoration, but a declaration. It proclaims that the master's service participates in a universal geometry. He has ruled the lodge not merely as an officer of men, but as an imitator of the great architect. To be invested with the 47th proposition is to be reminded that true authority is mathematical, proportionate, balanced, and enduring. In this way, the jewel binds together governance and eternity, office and order. It tells every past master that his year in the chair is but a reflection, however imperfect, of that higher truth which Masonry holds as its central mystery, that the laws which square the stone also square the soul. Interlude: the Osiris-Isis-Horus Triangle. Let us now leave the lodge chamber for a moment and enter the temples of ancient Egypt. Imagine a priest at Memphis tracing a triangle in sand upon the floor. He marks one side with the number 3, another with 4, and the hypotenuse with 5. To his initiates he explains, "This is no accident. These numbers are divine." Plutarch tells us that the Egyptian sages saw in this figure the triad of their gods: Osiris, the spiritual principle, as the upright 3, Isis, the generative matter, as the horizontal 4, and Horus, their child, as the diagonal 5, the living world brought forth from their union. The 47th proposition, to them, was nothing less than a cosmic genealogy, spirit and matter united to produce life itself. Albert Pike seized on this symbolism in Morals and Dogma, remarking that the triangle is a universal cipher of creation, a law in mathematics that also encodes the mysteries of the divine. The same threefold relationship, he said, echoes across traditions, in Plato's Good, Beautiful, and World, in the Kabbalistic triad of the Tree of Life, in the alchemical principles of salt, sulfur, and mercury. Always the same pattern: 3 joined to 4 to produce 5, principles joined to matter to generate form. Here, then, we glimpse the power of the 47th proposition not only as a geometric proof, but as a metaphysical parable. The hypotenuse does not merely close the triangle, it symbolizes the child of two parents, the harmony of opposites, the manifestation of creation itself. To look upon the figure is to see in miniature the marriage of heaven and earth, and so this interlude stands as a threshold. Having traced the symbol in legend, in institution, in satire, and in honour, we now turn to its deeper voice, the philosophical resonance of geometry as the very language of the divine. The divine architecture of numbers, from 3, 4, and 5 to 3 to 5 to 7. Consider first the theorem as numbered form. The 3, 4, 5 triangle is not merely a convenience of surveyors. It is a proportion that seems to fit both mind and matter with equal inevitability. In the classical diagram, two lesser squares are seen to generate the greater. What appears as a graphical identity becomes, in contemplation, a metaphysical hint. The plurality resolves into ordered unity by a law neither arbitrary nor local. This is why the proposition was long read, not only as a geometric fact, but as a cosmogonic figure. Spirit conjoined with matter to bring forth a world. Plutarch preserves the Egyptian mapping, Osiris as the vertical 3, Isis as the horizontal 4, Horus as the diagonal 5, a symbolic genealogy of being that Enlightenment and 19th century Masons eagerly re-received and layered with further correspondences, Plato's Good World Beautiful, the Kabbalistic triads, the alchemical salt-sulfur-mercury over against the four elements, and the emergent fifth essence. In that register, 3 denotes principle, 4 denotes manifestation, and 5 denotes the living product of their union, an ascent from intelligible cause to sensible world to ensouled totality. Now, if we turn from the diagram to the numbers themselves, a new pattern begins to unfold. Think of the squares on each side of the triangle. 3 squared gives 9, 4 squared gives 16, and 5 squared gives 25. Now look at the differences between those numbers. From 1 to 4, a difference of 3. From 4 to 9, a difference of 5. From 9 to 16, a difference of 7. So from the 3, 4, 5 triangle of geometry, there quietly emerges a new sequence, 3, 5, and 7, the numbers of ascent familiar to every Mason. Craft Masonry has long fastened upon this veiled sequence. 3 to open and rule a lodge, 5 or more to hold it in competent labour, and 7 or more to render it perfect. 3 degrees for the moral education of the initiate. 5 orders of architecture or, in many lectures, the 5 senses. 7 liberal arts and sciences through which reason is cultivated into wisdom. What began in chalk as a right-angled proof becomes, in the life of the lodge, a ladder of number, office, and discipline. This, then, is the crux. The proposition couples demonstration to formation. Geometry, the first and noblest of sciences, is the basis on which the superstructure of Masonry is erected, as the fellow craft is taught. The same faculty by which a theorem is proved is the faculty by which a life is shaped. Hence, the moral dictum embedded in our lectures, that the immutable relation of sides is an image of the immutable relation of virtues. As the builder squares his stone by rule, so the mason squares his conduct by principle. The movement from 3, 4, 5 to 3, 5, 7 is therefore not a play of numerology, but a pedagogy of ascent, from the proof that is to the formation of one who becomes. To make the same point in another key, the 47th proposition exhibits the union of practical building and abstract reason. Operative usage sets a corner true by the 3, 4, 5 rule. Speculative reflection recognizes in that rule an archetype of rectitude. The visible square descends from an invisible relation. The skilled hand applies what the contemplative mind knows. Thus, practice is justified by theory, and theory is proved in practice, a reciprocity that Masonry elevates into method. In oral form, this can be spoken plainly. You square your square when it gets out of square, because there exists a measure outside oneself by which both stones and souls may be corrected. At this point, some will ask whether such symbolic extensions are warranted. 2 replies present themselves. First, the historical record shows that eminent Masonic writers intended such extensions. Albert Pike read the 3, 4, 5 as a portable triad, a cipher of creation whose analogues in Platonism, Kabbalah, and alchemy are neither accidental nor merely ornamental. Manly P. Hall pressed the same line further, speaking of the threefold aspect of father, mother, and child, whose natural and peculiar symbol is the 47th proposition of Euclid, a formula of spirit, matter, and the sum of living things. Second, even if one brackets the esoteric, the internal didactic of the craft already compels the move from theorem to ethic. The lecture's insistence that the 47th teaches Masons to be general lovers of the arts and sciences is not a romantic flourish, but a rule of intellectual life, binding the authority of proof to the discipline of learning. What then of the celebrated numbers themselves? 3 signifies principiation, unity refracted into a structured whole, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, or more classically, cause, form, end. 4 designates the world's extension, the quaternary of elements, the cardinality of space, the squared foundation upon which architecture stands. 5 names emergence, life raised above mere extension, the quintessence by which matter is informed and purposive. In the craft, these meanings are made habit by work. 3 principal offices to initiate order. 5 to ensure proportion and skill. 7 to perfect by liberal training. If you wish a single sentence that gathers the doctrine, 3, 4, 5 is the law by which things are true. 3, 5, 7 is the way by which men become worthy of truth. Finally, return to the quiet audacity of the diagram itself. 2 small squares beget a greater. The diagonal reconciles the orthogonal. Plurality is not abolished, but summed. Hall's theological gloss is plain. Father and mother produce the child. Yet, even shorn of myth, the philosophical statement remains. Necessity governs generation. Reason underwrites form. That is why this emblem sits so naturally beside our other teachings. It licenses the lodge's intellectual charge, be lovers of the arts and sciences, and it vindicates our moral one, build by rule, correct by principle, ascend by number. Or, to place the emphasis where it belongs, the 47th proposition is not only a theorem to be proved, it is a pattern to be lived. If we have followed the argument carefully, the ascent is now visible. From the 3, 4, 5 of demonstration to the 3, 5, 7 of discipline, the Mason learns that truth and formation are of one piece. The square that steadies a wall steadies a will. The proportion that binds a triangle binds a life. And this is why, within our tradition, geometry is not metaphor, but sacrament. A visible figure that communicates an invisible order, a law of stones that becomes a law of souls. The eternal proof. Geometry as universal truth. We have traced the 47th proposition from legend to ritual, from satire to jewel, from esoteric triads to the ladder of numbers. But what remains, what must remain, is its enduring lesson. The 47th problem of Euclid occupies a singular place in our tradition, precisely because it bridges what is material and what is moral, what is literal and what is allegorical. On one level, it is a tribute to science, the knowledge that enabled humanity to build temples and cities, to navigate the seas, to measure the cosmos itself. As Anderson called it, it is the foundation of all masonry, sacred, civil, and military. Without geometry, the craft could not exist. Without this theorem, geometry itself would lack its cornerstone. Yet, on another level, the 47th proposition is more than the craftsman's tool. It is the philosopher's proof. Its demonstration is simple, but its implications are universal. Wherever a right angle is set, in every corner of the universe, the same relation holds. It is eternal, demonstrable, unchanging. One commentary put it memorably. Of all people, Masons should know what a square is, and it is impossible for us to conceive of a place in the universe where the 47th problem is not true. Here is the crux. Geometry is not only practical, but metaphysical. It is the visible image of Logos, the rational order of creation itself. For Masons, who invoke the great architect of the universe, this is no abstraction. The laws by which a wall is squared are the very laws by which the world is governed. To study them is to approach the divine. To live by them is to align one's soul with the harmony of the cosmos. Geometry becomes sacramental, a visible sign of an invisible truth. And yet, let us not forget the human element. The 47th proposition also embodies the joy of discovery. Pythagoras' Eureka is not merely a legend, but the archetype of every moment when reason glimpses hidden order. To cry Eureka is to experience, however briefly, the exhilaration of truth unveiled. Every Mason is called to emulate that ardent seeker, to cultivate knowledge, to delight in the sciences, to rejoice in discovery. So let the figure hang silently upon the wall of the lodge, or gleam upon the breast of a past master. It whispers a timeless injunction: square your work, square your conduct, square your life. For only when we build upon truth, proven by demonstration, can we raise an edifice that endures. Through the 47th proposition, Freemasonry unites the wisdom of ancient geometry with its own moral and spiritual edifice. It assures us that truth is absolute, that discovery is joyful, and that the very laws that measure stone also measure the soul. And in that recognition lies the true mystery of the craft, that the square traced in dust is already the blueprint of eternity. For a deep dive into the history, philosophy, and traditions of Freemasonry, subscribe to From the Quarries. You will find hundreds of lectures, presentations, shorts, and other Masonic works written by Freemasons for Freemasons. Visit fromthequarries.com or YouTube at From the Quarries.